stellar world of Italian football, Milan's San Siro looms larger than most, home throughout the years to some of the world's finest players. Yet one man has come to symbolise one half of the city more than any other.
You're talking about a symbol, you're talking about a player who represents an era, and you're talking about someone who should be imitated.
Few players can boast of a career spanning 3 decades at the very highest level. Fewer still are loyal to just one club.
His association with the club is a fairy tale, really.
One of the finest defenders football has ever produced, this true legend of the game has become the very embodiment of this truly legendary club.
He's a real Rossonero. His soul belongs to Milan.
The club, of course, is AC Milan, and the player is Paolo Maldini. In terms of the modern game, Paolo Maldini is something of a throwback. Serie A debut at 16, still playing aged 40. More than 1,000 career appearances, capped 126 times by his country. Ability, agility, strength and spirit. Nearly 30 years at the very highest level in one of football's toughest leagues. Undeniably a giant of the game. Born in Milan in 1968, Paolo Maldini was perhaps always destined for greatness. His father, Cesare, was already a Milan legend, having lifted the European Cup for the Rossoneri in 1963. Initially, however, the young Paolo's attention was drawn towards Turin.
I used to really like Juventus back then. I watched the Italian team in the 1978 World Cup in Argentina, and that side was mainly made up of Juventus players.
He used to have a poster of Bettega. I remember in his bedroom there was a big poster of Bettega. I was the one who gave it to him.
The allegiance was not to last. At the San Pio Oratory, the young Paolo enjoyed playing in goal, though his talent as an outfield player was all too obvious. A question posed by his father unwittingly created one of football's most enduring relationships. Paolo would forever be linked with Milan.
Obviously, I spent my whole life in the Milan shirt. And even today, I'm a big Rossonero. But I asked him if he wanted to go for a trial with Milan, the Rossoneri, or with Inter, the Nerazzurri. Paolo immediately said, no, Milan. I want to try out for Milan.
I bought my boots in the morning and then went to Milan for my trial. They asked me what my position was and I told them that I didn't have one. So they played me in the one position that they hadn't filled, which was on the right wing. And they signed me up pretty much immediately, on that first day.
The name Maldini once again belonged at Milan, as Paolo followed in his father's footsteps.
Yes, at first you could have thought that it was inevitable that he'd train with us in the first team, simply because of his surname. And we didn't know what to expect, as that's an important surname in Milan's history.
He didn't talk about it, but you could see it a bit at the beginning. But then it soon became obvious that there was no arguing about his ability as a player. To be honest, you can't get into a first team like Milan's on name alone.
Paolo's next step was to conquer the San Siro.
I'd been to the San Siro a few times as a kid, so it had that mythical aura about it for me. The first time I walked out, I was actually on the bench. I remember it was a Milan v Fiorentina game in the snow. If I'm honest, I hoped that I wouldn't come on because I was a little afraid.
That trepidation remained with the teenager until he finally made his debut, aged just 16, in 1985.
That was scary, but the idea was always to be good enough to play at that level. I remember after the first few minutes I got the ball and I passed it back to the keeper, and it was only then that it dawned on me that I was finally playing in Serie A.
And playing in good company too, alongside the legendary Franco Baresi.
He was very young, so I tried to give him some advice, but he needed very little. He was already a great player.
It was immediately obvious that here was a top-class player. Even at 17, he had a strong character and was eager to learn.
His notable qualities were his physical strength and his running. Playing at full-back, he managed to make the left wing his own and made everything look so easy in his own unique way.
He has an extraordinary physique. When he'd have 50, 60 or 100-metre races, he'd always be first. So he's got the physique of an athlete, not just a footballer.
When he got up the field, he didn't just kick the ball anywhere, he'd cross it perfectly to a teammate. So he had this great talent, great balance and great technique. As a result, he was a complete player.
In 1986, with Milan on the verge of bankruptcy, Silvio Berlusconi arrived as president with the sole intention of transforming the Rossoneri into the greatest team in the world. A year later, Arrigo Sacchi was appointed as manager.
If I compare him with his predecessor, Mr. Liedholm was much more focused on the physical side of our game, but less on the mental side. Sacchi taught us to be unbelievably focused, to think about football all the time, and it was very stressful.
From '88, when Sacchi arrived, they had a much more competitive team. They had Tassotti, Maldini, Baresi, Gullit and Van Basten. They had great players, allied to a great coach, and in those years they started to win, not just in the derbies, but also cups and championships.
As the rest of the world looked on in envy, somewhat unusually, it was not only the forwards who attracted all the attention.
The spine of that team was very important. The defence was extremely strong. We managed to become a very well-drilled unit.
In that defence, all four of us were able to move in the same way or read the game in exactly the same way. I think that was our success. And it wasn't even just the four of us either. There were five, as Filippo Galli was also part of that defence.
It was the culture of hard work. Obviously we had good technical players like Gullit and Van Basten, but we had a strong Italian spine led by Baresi, Maldini, Costa Curta, Tassotti, Donadoni and Ancelotti. Very important players who were also top class.
With such a group of players, success was inevitable. Paolo's first taste of silverware was the 1988 Scudetto, cementing his place in Milan's history, and all before his 20th birthday.
I think that was the year he established himself, where he imposed himself as a great player, and we won the Scudetto in 1988, and from there it all snowballed. We won the European Cup the following season.
20 years had passed since Milan's last European Cup final. Now Star Bucharest stood between them and glory.
It was great. It was my first final in it. Had something that these days is probably impossible. A stadium filled with red and black, up against maybe 300 or 400 Star fans. It was an incredible sight, not to mention the level of support we received. As soon as we saw that stadium, we knew that we couldn't lose the game.
Berlusconi's dream was becoming reality. Milan were now Europe's dominant force. If further proof were needed, the following year Maldini and company had the chance to defend their crown against Benfica in Vienna.
Once you win the Champions League or any championship, you always hope to win again. But you know it gets harder and harder to win them. The fact of having won one, though, completes you as a footballer.
I think in those years Paolo became a true Milan player, a really important player who would then make his mark with the national team.
Still only 21 and a double European champion, Paolo was indeed an established international. His father Cesare had set the ball rolling, selecting him for Italy's under-21 squad in 1986. But once again his ability pushed him rapidly up through the ranks.
Paolo was just 18, so he was ahead of schedule. But he only ended up playing one season with us. The Italian manager at the time, Aurelio Vicini, called me aside and told me that he wanted him in the squad, with the main team. And so I said, okay.
Paolo's first full international tournament was Euro '88, where Italy reached the semi-finals, only to lose to the USSR. In 1990, this time as the host nation of the World Cup finals, Italy again reached the semi-finals. The opposition was Argentina. The venue was Napoli's San Paolo Stadium, home of Diego Maradona. It was Paolo's first experience of a penalty shootout, but it wouldn't be his last.
I think in that World Cup we deserved to get to the final. We played so well. It's a shame how it all turned out. It was a real disappointment, as we did have the side to win a World Cup back then.
Milan, though, remained all-conquering. With Fabio Capello now in charge, they won 4 Scudettos in 5 years, including a spell of 58 games unbeaten. Paolo was one of the invincibles.
The strength of that team was the players. I'm 100% sure about that. We had an unbelievable squad. We had players who were very technical, physical, and had strong personalities. So we had everything we needed to become a great team.
Such strength led to Maldini's 4th European Cup final in 1994, though this time both Costa Curta and Baresi were absent.
We had a problem. We had our 2 centre-backs suspended for that game, and that could have been a great disadvantage against a really good attacking side like Barcelona, who had Romario up front.
I remember it being a very tough game, but Barcelona didn't help themselves with their attitude.
They were treating the game as if it would be a stroll in the park, rather than a Champions League final, against a team who'd already proven how good we were over the previous years.
Barcelona and their manager Johan Cruyff seemed to think the game was already won.
One of their directors had his photo taken with the cup before the game. We read the papers. We were gobsmacked.
However, the fact that we were playing as underdogs for the first time helped push us a little more. And then it became perhaps the best ever final Milan have played in.
There was international heartache, though, in the World Cup final that same year. A pattern was beginning to emerge.
We never had the best of luck with penalties. However, this time I think we came up against a side like Brazil who had actually played better than us throughout the tournament. And they deserved to win it on the day too.
For Baresi, it was almost the end. The captain's armband was passed to Maldini. 2 years later, spirits were high in the Italian camp as Maldini led his country into Euro '96 in England. Reunited with his former mentor, Arrigo Sacchi, Paolo revelled in the captaincy. As relaxed and as accommodating as ever, he still remained focused on all things Italian.
Voglio chiederti una cosa, e se puoi rispondere in inglese? Perché...
No.
Assolutamente?
Assolutamente.
Anche se ti chiedo la domanda?
No. Sì, no.
Ma per la pubblicità la fai?
No.
Ok.
Despite the captain's typically spirited performances, the tournament ultimately ended in disappointment for the Italians. Another crucial missed penalty meant they failed to progress beyond even the group stage. Back on the home front, Milan too were struggling, and even Maldini himself didn't escape the wrath of the fans.
I think that the lion's share of the responsibility fell on the older players' shoulders. If you had to find a scapegoat, then we were the ones who were singled out, but we knew full well that the problems lay elsewhere.
There are a lot of changes made, mainly due to the Bosman law, and a lot of players joining for free, and a lot of foreign players joining too. So this changed the philosophy of the club a little bit. There was the passing of the old guard of players, and the arrival of new players who needed to take on board the club philosophy.
For Maldini, respite from Milan's woes came in the shape of his third World Cup, and France '98 was a family affair.
I was a little bit worried about it. However, we came to an agreement that I would talk normally to the players as a group. I never talked one-on-one with individual players. I think maybe Paolo had more problems with the situation than I did. Instead of calling me boss, he'd call me dad and things like that. But there was never an issue. When you have to play, you go on and play. Paolo was just one of 11 players.
But the gods of the game were once again smiling elsewhere. In a manner all too familiar, the Azzurri were left to wonder what might have been.
I don't think we were as strong as the sides in '94 and '90, but even then, if it wasn't for that defeat against France, we would have been up against Croatia in the semi-finals, and the door to the final would have been wide open.
As the new millennium arrived, history was made. Paolo made his 113th international appearance and became at the time Italy's most capped player. But opportunities for international glory were few and far between, and in the final of Euro 2000, another slipped away. Once again, France were the victors, this time courtesy of David Trezeguet's golden goal.
I think maybe that team was a little weaker than before. We'd given everything we could give. We had to accept the result, even if it wasn't the right one.
Sadly for Maldini, such a result remained forever elusive. In 2002, the World Cup in Japan and Korea proved to be his international swan song, and not a happy one, as once again Italy was struck by the curse of the golden goal against the hosts, South Korea.
That was horrible. A horrible exit. A ridiculous game. It was just a really bad memory there. In part because of the atmosphere out there in the Far East. It was totally different to what we were used to from the football fans, in the way they supported teams and so on. And then there were the problems with the referee. Just a really bad memory of that World Cup.
Immediately following the tournament, after 14 years, 126 caps and 7 goals, Maldini announced his retirement from international football. It was undoubtedly a record-breaking career, but it was also one ultimately tinged with regret.
It was a great disappointment for him. Paolo never achieved what he should have done with the national team, even if he did get to a final.
In all the World Cups I played in, Italy have always been one of the main contenders. But there is such a small difference between winning and losing.
At international level, I think Paolo has been one of the all-time greats. Not just in Europe either. He's known all over the world for his ability, his bravery, and the way he handles himself.
Italy's loss was Milan's gain. The captain returned to his club, determined to lead them back to European glory. Defeats in 1993 and 95 had not been forgotten, and the Champions League final of 2003 brought together two of Italy's biggest clubs.
It had been a long time since we were one of the big hitters in the Champions League, so we immediately realised the importance of the occasion.
The final went to penalties.
When Paolo lifted the European Cup, just incredible. It's something exceptional for both of us to have lifted the European Cup, and then both of us doing it in England too. Incredible. One of us in Manchester and the other myself at Wembley. Just incredible. These are emotions that the good Lord gives us only occasionally, that go beyond football.
They are the moments when I think that Milan is the best club in the world, when there's something to win, and I know that we've lost on occasions, but when the opportunity to win is there, we generally take it.
One such opportunity not taken by Milan came 2 years later against Liverpool in Istanbul. Paolo's 7th European Cup final saw him make his mark early in one of the most astonishing finals ever.
My first memory is my goal, which I got after only 40-odd seconds, which is something personal to me, and then the fact that we played such a superb game. If we decided on points, then we'd have won easily. But I'm afraid fate wasn't with us that day.
The second half saw Liverpool stage an incredible comeback. From 3-0 to 3-3 in 6 remarkable minutes.
Apart from that short period in the second half, when they scored 3 goals, Milan were much the better team, physically and tactically. And I have to say that the way the game finished left a really bitter taste in the mouth. But as a team, we couldn't say anything, as we played the near-perfect game.
2 years later, in Athens, Milan were out for revenge.
Destiny can give you some bitter surprises, as well as some good ones. We had everything to lose against Liverpool, as they'd already beaten us once. If they'd beaten us again, then they really would have killed us off. But we drew on all our strength to beat them.
A 2-1 win brought Paolo his 5th European Cup.
That's the difference between normal players and world-class players. Paolo Maldini managed to win the Champions League at nearly 39 years old, because he is an incredible athlete and an exemplary professional.
When Maldini finally retired in 2009, Milan retired his number 3 shirt, a fitting testament not only to one of the most successful players of all time, but also to the longevity of his career at one of the world's greatest clubs.
He flies the flag for his club like very few captains can.
So for all the players who come here, even Ronaldinho, one of the last big names to sign, they all want to see Maldini. Because when you think of Milan, you think of Maldini.
It's a fact that Paolo has never once thought of moving to another team. Never.
It's part of my life. I started playing here when I was 10, and I'm still here at 40. Most of my life has been spent here at Milan. Apart from that, there's also my father's history here that binds me even more to the club. so it's definitely a huge part of my life.